professor of education. Her first few degrees were in science, in chemistry, MSc in chemistry, followed by a PhD in education from the Jamia Millia Islamia. She's also studied at AMU, at the Aligarh Muslim University, and she's a person who wears many hats. So because of her science background, she's obviously interested in science education, but she's also interested in and teaches curriculum studies. She teaches the sociology of education, and in her capacity as professor at Jamia Millia Islamia, she is also the manager of a school in Bada Hindu Rao in Delhi. This is Delhi 6, as they say nowadays. In our days, they used to say Old Delhi. So she is a manager of that school, and that school is 95% Muslim students, 95% working class children, and some 50% worker children. So it's a very unique school in many ways. And what Professor Farooqui, what Farah has done, is that she's written about the school in a journal published jointly by Digantar and APU. This is Shiksha Vimarsh. And there her column is called A School Manager Ki Diary Ke Kuch Panne. She is now in the process of revising that, and I hope that you will publish this work in English, because from this work I got to understand. I've been following it, and I've also been with her to the various mohallas from which the children come, to their homes, and I learned that here is a person who's not a manager who simply signs checks or pulls up teachers. She goes and has chai in the canteen with the canteen chap. She's very friendly with him, in fact, and then he takes her to the various mohallas. She goes and visits students, and she tries to make all kinds of interesting linkages between the family setup of the students and the mohallas in which the school is located, and what happens inside the school and inside the classroom. So I think there's a very detailed, thick description of education, of students, of teachers and teaching and learning in her work. And it is this description that she will talk about today. She calls it Silenced and Marginalized, Voices from an Ordinary Sarkari School of Delhi. I know that in your bio note, you've spoken of Iqbal, and I want to in fact recite a few verses from Faiz which are very relevant to your work, but I think I'll keep that in abeyance. I'll do that after we've heard you, because then they'll be even more relevant. So Professor Farah Farooqui, gives me the greatest pleasure to invite you to our university, and on this Teachers' Day to request you to speak on Silenced and Marginalized, Voices from an Ordinary Sarkari School of Delhi.
I would like to say that I am grateful to the Azim Premji University for this opportunity. And as Anil told me that I am the manager of a government-aided school which is situated in the walled city, popularly called as Delhi 6. And it's been more than 4 years now. And this has this has provided me with a very unique opportunity to study in some depth the socio-cultural, economic and political factors underlying school and classroom practices. And since not just in this school but in many other government and aided schools in the area, the children enrolled are from more or less similar socio-economic background. The issues which are raised in this presentation can be extended to cover many more schools and thousands of children in urban pockets of similar kinds. A thick description about living and working conditions of these children is, I think, necessary for understanding the processes of silent exclusion of the kids in school. And I will also attempt to describe to you the interplay between the factory, residence, school and ups and downs of the market, the nature of family and support system in order to understand to bring before you the social reality of these children. And through glimpses of school and classroom engagements, I'll try to elaborate how inadequate these are in raising the consciousness of these children towards their multiple identities and their status vis-a-vis larger society. And it goes without saying that discrimination and its perception excludes people and children from better living and working conditions, and it leads to their marginalization. Yeah, please allow me to read out my paper, as it consists of thick description, and analysis is actually woven into the description. And if I talk, I think I'll miss out on important details which are central to the argument. As Anil again, he told you that 95% children who come to the school are from Muslim minority backgrounds, who are either workers themselves or are children of workers who sell their labor to earn a living. This school and many other schools in the locality, which is it's densely populated area around the walled city, and the mohallas which have been looked at in this paper include Bada Hindu Rao, Ahata Kidara, Chimney Mill, Nai Basti, Gali Ishwari Prasad, Pasapura, Eidgah, and other mohallas around these. There is, if you go into the mohalla, you will find that there is a crisscross web of narrow lanes in the area. Some of these lanes with houses and small factories, which are called as karkhanas, on the both sides are so narrow that walls on both the sides can be easily touched if one stands with hands stretched on both sides. In these lanes are located houses and karkhanas, or places which serve both as karkhanas and living space. In many places, the ground floor and the lower floors are occupied by karkhanas, whereas the top floors have houses. Many karkhanas house heavy machinery, in which instruments used in small machines for making plastic or metal items are made. These heavy machines can be seen installed in a space as small as 6 to 8 feet, or big halls 20 by 20 feet in size. In many places, there are small interconnected rooms, and some of these rooms have bunker roofs to create more space. These spaces are used for loading raw material into machines, sorting and cutting out material, packing it for deporting. 6 to 8 people can be seen working on such heavy machines. The temperature inside these factories is much higher than the outside temperature, and fans and coolers are used even in winters. In some of these karkhanas, work which is deemed as hazardous takes place. This involves glass cutting, nickel polishing, working with acids. Apart from karkhanas that manufactures machines used for making items like plasticware and other things, there are karkhanas where dairies, cloth and leather bags, belts, artificial jewelry, bangles, jeans, etc. are made. Some of these places just serve as workshops where such material is produced, but some others serve both as living space and karkhanas. Allow me to describe to you a karkhana which produces diaries. The narrow which I visited with principal and one or two of my colleagues, the narrow, dark and broken staircase was difficult to climb. Two narrow rectangular rooms on the first and the second floor are used both as karkhana and living space for workers. At 9 a.m. when we reached, we found the workers still sleeping, as work in these karkhanas happened till 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. These workers were between ages 12 to 22, and 8 of them were sleeping in a row. In this room measuring 8 by 12 feet, 3 sewing machines were kept on one side, raw material was piled up in another corner, stacks of diaries were kept at another place. These boys seemed embarrassed to see us and tried hard to hide their torn clothes and dirty sheet covers. Just opposite the open door of the room, the toilet door was open in the pathway, and the stench was telling its own tale of oppression, tyranny, and cruelty. The owners of such factories are also from towns where these workers have been hired. Migration from UP, Bihar, and other neighboring towns has a chain-like pattern. The owners procure cheap labor from these poverty-ridden areas. The impoverished relatives and friends of the workers tag along or follow suit. Many workers in these karkhanas are either relatives or people who know each other as they are from neighboring villages and towns. Most workers and their families live in hardship with shortage of space, sanitation, and civic amenities. The perception that they will not gain acceptance or access to other localities where people from dominant communities are in majority is one of the reasons for their decision to live in this dense ghetto. Moreover, there is interdependence in work and a give and take relationship between them. This further compels them to live and work in this area where rents are soaring high due to commercialization. This perception also shuts upon them chances of looking for better livelihood opportunities. According to the elder brother of one of our student Irshad, परदेसी की ज़िंदगी बड़ी मोहताजी की होती है, खाने के लिए, पानी के लिए, हर चीज़ के लिए मोहताज. The life of an outsider is one of great dependence, and one has to depend on others for food, for water, for everything. Another thing that I wish to highlight here is that it is well known that many Muslims in regions of UP and Bihar have traditionally been artisans, but I fear that many of them have now slipped into becoming workers, mazdoor, due to liberal economic assault. While the artisans enjoyed some control over their craft and life conditions, these workers have been robbed of their finer skills and their work is alienating. For example, in this area, to make a finished product like a simple cloth bag, there are several subunits. At one workshop, only cutting of material takes place. At the next place, it is stitched, motif printing, cutting extra threads, putting zip, and finally packing takes place at other places. So none of these workers learn the complete skill involved in making of bag. In fact, their labor is like one of these add-ons leading to the final product. Moreover, they have to continuously deal with uncertainties of demand and supply in market, and the ups and downs of the market renders many children and people without work. Many karkhanas are operated from one-room houses. In a narrow lane in Ahata Kidara, a one-room bag making karkhana doubles up as home. In this 10 by 10 room, gas stove and utensils were scattered on one side, sewing machine were placed against one wall of the room. Against another wall, both raw material and heaps of cloth bags were kept. In an open almirah made in a wall, clothes, books, and school bags of the family members were tossed up in a disorderly manner, and in a way reflected the chaos and confusion of their lives. It was difficult to figure out how 7 members slept in this cramped space in the night, but it is well known that workers in such areas sleep and work in shifts due to extreme shortage of space. Many children of our school are compelled to shoulder economic burden of their families and labor in these karkhanas. There are some children who, along with their siblings, have to bear the entire economic burden because adults are not in a position to support. For example, Ijaz of class 10, whose father's hand got crushed in a machine and hence he stopped working. Ijaz works in a printing press. He reaches home from school at 1 p.m., immediately leaves for work after having his lunch. He started working 2 years ago on a pittance of rupees 500, which has now increased to rupees 4,000 per month. Ijaz is forced to work in the night shift as well in order to somehow make both ends meet. In his words, मैम क्या करें, नाइट लगानी पड़ती है लेकिन आमदनी ठीक ठाक हो जाती है. Ma'am, what to do? One has to put in these nights. At least one is able to earn well. He returns home at 2:30 a.m., sleeps for 2-3 hours and reaches school at 7 a.m. Likewise, Najib and his younger brother shoulder the entire economic burden of their family. Najib's work is a little different. He does event or party management and earns between 400 to 800 per party. At times he feels distressed that he lacks finer skills. Many other children help the adults of their family in the work they do. Sheikhur Rahman of class 7 helps his father in making and packing of bangles. Badre Alam of class 6 helps his father in making bags. Ma's father is a butcher and he has already learned to make meat pieces from him. However, his father does more difficult work like slaughtering and deskinning animals. There are many children in school who simply refuse on asking that they work or contribute towards their family income. They don't do this out of any feeling of embarrassment, but they themselves or their family members don't realize that they are an important link in this whole system. When I saw a child of our school sitting in a mobile shop and other taking charge of a meat shop, I asked them if they work there on a regular basis. The answer was, अरे नहीं, वो अब्बा खाना खाने और सोने गए हैं, इसलिए मैं कुछ घंटे दुकान देख रहा हूँ, वरना काम तो अब्बा ही करते हैं. No, not at all. Father has gone for lunch and a nap. So I am looking after the shop for a few hours. Basically, it is father who works, not me. On another occasion, I met a child getting tires loaded on a hand cart. On asking, he replied, "नहीं काम नहीं करता, बस टायर लोड करवा रहा हूँ." No, I do not work. I am just getting the tires loaded. Dilnawaz studies in class 2. His parents run a bag making workshop from their one-room house. They claim that their children are not involved in any income generating activity and are given all freedom to study. Just then Dilnawaz entered with a large bag dangling from his shoulder, informed his mother, "Maal pahuncha diya," and handed over the acquired money. Many girls in the school, apart from helping with domestic chores since very young age, assist in making clips, decorative items and in packing of various things. The percentage of worker children in this school and many other schools in the area is about 65% or more. There are many children in this school whose father, uncle or elder brother migrated to Delhi 5 to 10 years ago in search of work. In the hope to give quality education to younger generation, they moved the children to Delhi. Many children, including girls, live only with their male relatives, while their mother and other female members continue to live in their hometowns. Since female members of the family are not with them, they have to shoulder domestic responsibilities like cooking, washing, cleaning, etc. Many children like Irshad are well aware of their uncertain future with regard to education. Irshad of class 5 says, "दीदी मैं 5वीं में हूँ और 14 साल मेरी उम्र हो गई है, पता नहीं कितना पढ़ पाऊँगा और भाई कितना पढ़ा पाएंगे." "Didi, I am in class 5 and I am already 14. I cannot say for how many years I may be able to continue. Do not know for how long my brother can support me as a student." Irshad and his younger brother Dilshad live with their brother in Delhi. Their brother has a small belt making unit. Irshad prepares breakfast in the morning, then lunch for his elder and younger brother, and 2 other workers of the Karkhana. He reaches school at 12:30 p.m. since our primary school is held in the evening shift. On returning back from school, he devotes a few hours in making bells, cooks dinner, tries to do his homework before going off to sleep. They are not able to visit their mother in Bihar every year. Since the relatives of such children are busy trying to earn for the family, they don't have the time to put balm on their emotional scars when they get bullied in school or become laughing stock of their peers on speaking their home language. As I said earlier, since work in Karkhanas happens till late at night, the responsibility of waking up early in the morning to reach school on time then lies with the children themselves. Many children come to the school without any breakfast and wait for the break to eat something, especially those of higher classes who don't get midday meal at school. The children who are bored of repetitive menu at a small canteen in the school jump walls to fetch aloo puri. Any way to jump limits and boundaries is always exhilarating for these young adults. A glimpse into family and kinship bonds reveals that life cycle rituals like wedding, death, and other ceremonies are demanding on time and are religiously pursued. But because, of course, there is a dearth of resources which results in conflicts and quarrels. Moreover, kinships are also entangled with give and take, credit and debt relationship. In some families, father is unemployed due to illness or ups and downs of untrustworthy market. In such a condition, mother and children have to shoulder economic responsibilities. When they do this, they also demand their share in decision making. This results in a feeling of disempowerment amongst men who perceive this as an assault on their masculinity. The consequence is conflict, broken families. Having given you some idea about children's socio-economic and cultural reality, I would like to now talk about how several teachers in the school construct these children. Statements made about the children depict not only their prejudice, but also reveals the social distance between them. Some statements which are made about children are these. I just have what? बंजर ज़मीन पर खेती नहीं होती है. Nothing much grows on fallow land. इन्हें रिफॉर्मेटरी स्कूल की ज़रूरत है. अमेरिका में ऐसे स्कूल हैं जहाँ ऐसे बच्चों को रखा जाता है. These kids need reformatory schools. America has such schools where they keep such kids. अरे इनके माँ बाप को फिक्र ही कहाँ है. रात में 2-2 बजे तक जागते हैं, दिन भर सोते हैं, बच्चे स्कूल भूखे आते हैं. ये पुरानी दिल्ली की खासियत है. Their parents are not worried. They remain up until 2 a.m. and sleep during the day. The children go hungry to school. This is a characteristic feature of old Delhi. इनके घरों में गाली गलौच लड़ाइयाँ आम हैं. यही सब देखते हुए बड़े होते हैं. Abusive language and quarrels are common in their houses. These kids have grown up seeing all this. छोटे छोटे कमरों में रहते हैं, वहीं माँ बाप सोते हैं, वहीं बच्चे छोटी उम्र में ही सब कुछ जान जाते हैं. They live in tiny rooms, the parents sleep there, so do the kids. The children begin to understand everything from a very young age. And you know, 1 or 2 teachers have made following this remark for children. सरकारी भीख पर पलते हो, फिर भी इतनी शरारत करते हो. You have been brought up on government's largesse, yet you are so wicked. Having peeped into the social reality of these children, you can very well understand how unjust such statements are about these children. Statements like nothing grows on fallow land show that socio-economic deprivation of the children has been ignored, and there is an essentialization of their low performance as natural inadequacy. Moreover, lack of routine and discipline in the life of these workers, which is governed by market, has been again overlooked to construct parents as uninterested in the education of their children. Hypothesis that such prejudice and stereotyping influences teacher-pupil relationship, which in turn has an effect on the classroom interaction and pedagogy, has been proved right by many researchers in the area. According to McLaren, schools are not just instructional sites but are also cultural arenas where heterogeneity of ideological and social forms collides in an unremitting struggle for dominance. So I think it's thus important to understand what messages of approval and disapproval are received by these children in school. This would include the messages related to their various identities such as gender, religion, and their work as labor force. The consciousness about our consciousness about these identities and their relationship with larger socio-political structures can give them some insight to transform not only their life situation but larger structures of oppression and inequality. Thus, it is important to peep into the school and classrooms for assessing the kind of support these children receive in understanding the reasons for the circumstances that they find themselves in. Since teachers are unaware of the challenges that these children continually face, they consciously or unconsciously say things which are demeaning and convey to the children that their social reality is not worthy of cognizance, let alone reflection in the curriculum. Punctuality in coming to the school is taken for granted, and defaulters are punished, ignoring the routine of worker children. Parent-teacher meetings are organized at 10 o'clock in the morning without paying heed to the schedule of workers. Moreover, indifferent utterances idolize middle-class culture and convey to the children that their hardships are their problem. Consider this conversation which took place in a class. Teacher, घर जाकर अखबार पढ़ा किसी ने कोशिश की खाद्य सुरक्षा अधिनियम के बारे में पढ़ने को बोला था. Did you read the newspaper at home? Did you try to read it? I had asked you to read about the food security bill. They all remained quiet. तुम्हारे घर में अखबार आता होगा ना? You must be getting a newspaper at home. Then again all were quiet. किसके घर में अखबार नहीं आता है? Who does not get a newspaper at home? All raise hands. पड़ोस में तो आता होगा, वहाँ से लेकर पढ़ना. किसके पड़ोस में आता है? Your neighbors might buy one. You can borrow it from them. Does anyone's neighbors get it? Two children raise hands. अखबार तो 2-3 रुपए का आता है, तुम खुद भी लेकर पढ़ सकते हो. A newspaper costs only 2 to 3 rupees. You can buy one. Or the angry outburst of a teacher, which may have no regard for the reality that these children earn their meal the hard way. बेगैरत अपनी सीट से कैसे उठा, काम के ना काज के 2.5 सेर अनाज के. अगर फिर से अपनी सीट से उठा तो यहीं दफन कर दूंगी, किसी को पता भी नहीं चलेगा. Shameless creature, how did you dare to get up from your seat? Worthless fellow who only consumes so much. If you get up from your seat again, I'll bury you right here. Nobody will ever come to know who killed you. Then I find that there is an overwhelming perception of discrimination which these children have identified, and this discrimination is related to their religious identity, And this is, this is quite evident in the responses of children, and they have deep questions related to their position vis-a-vis other groups and larger society. But the quality of teaching learning process does not help in clarifying their understanding. This is an excerpt from a real classroom interaction which took place with children of class 8. The discussion happened around a chapter on marginalization, which is there in the NCERT textbook of class 8, social political life. Teacher, and in fact I was interacting with children at this time. I asked them that we have learned about marginalization of Adivasis. Are Muslims also constructed differently? Shahbaz, कई बार मुसलमानों को आतंकवादी बताते हैं. Many a times Muslims are called as terrorists. Murtuza, मुसलमानों को नीची निगाह से देखते हैं. Muslims are looked down upon. अहमद इकबाल, ताज होटल में जो घटना हुई थी वो भी मुसलमान थे. The incident that happened in Taj Hotel also involved Muslims. Then I asked them, इसके अलावा और कुछ ध्यान आता है जो मुसलमानों के हाशिबंदी से जुड़ा हो? Do you recall anything else which you feel is connected with the marginalization of Muslims? अहमद इकबाल, अगर कहीं गैर कानूनी काम होता है तो मुसलमानों का नाम लिया जाता है. शक मुसलमानों पर ही किया जाता है. In case any illegal act happens at some place, Muslims are blamed for it. Only Muslims are suspected. अदनान, मुसलमान जब किसी नौकरी के लिए जाते हैं तो वो नहीं मिलती, लेकिन उसी नौकरी के लिए अगर कोई हिंदू जाता है तो नौकरी मिल जाती है. When Muslims apply for a job, they don't get it. But if a Hindu goes for the same job, he gets it. Apart from this, comments made in other formal and informal situations show that children have a deep sense of estrangement and alienation. Apart from media images and other tacit messages that children receive in their day-to-day interaction, they also understand from other sources that they are vulnerable to prejudice and discrimination. A local politician was invited to the Independence Day function. This is an excerpt from his speech. अगर कोई तुमसे कहे ये वतन तुम्हारा नहीं है तो कभी ना मानना. अरे हमारे बाप दादा की हड्डियाँ यहाँ दफन हैं, उन्होंने इस देश के लिए जान दी है, ये हमारा वतन है बिल्कुल उसी तरह जैसे औरों का है. A number of research studies support the premise that children who perceive discrimination and bias may feel discouraged to strive and struggle for academic success, as this contradicts the image of education as providing equality of opportunity. This needs to be examined as one of the factors in the glaring dropout or the push-out rates amongst Muslim children, as observed by the Sachar Committee report. Moreover, the quality of teaching learning process does not help the children much in standing the status of their group vis-a-vis other groups in society, let alone thinking about transforming their life situation. This interaction that I'm going to talk about, this was between a teacher and the children of the school, and this was regarding the making of constitution. Teacher said 3 साल तक लिखते रहे, उसमें दूसरे देशों के भी मसौदों को मंगवाया, उन्हें पढ़ा और तैयार किया. ये मेन था कि डेमोक्रेसी होगी, सेक्युलर होगा, हुकूमत का कोई मजहब नहीं होगा. They kept writing it for 3 years. They asked for and looked at the constitution of other countries. They stressed the need for a democracy, for secularism. The government will have no religion. Students, secular मतलब teacher, जिसका कोई एक धर्म ना हो, सबके लिए बराबर हो, where it has no single religion, where the government treats all equally. स्टूडेंट, बाबरी मस्जिद को बनारस में तोड़ दिया. पहले हिंदुओं ने मस्जिद गिराई. The Babri Masjid was pulled down in Banaras. First the Hindus pulled down the mosque. Teacher, तभी तो उसे 3 भागों में बांट दिया गया. ये तो संवैधानिक फैसला था. That is why it was split in 3 parts. This was a constitutional decision. Student, वो 500 साल पुरानी थी. It was 500 years old. Teacher, इसके बारे में बाद में बात करेंगे. संविधान के शुरू में कहा गया है वी द पीपल ऑफ इंडिया, कोई मजहबी कानून ना हो. we will talk about this later. The preamble of to constitution says we the people of India, there should be no religious laws. Student, communist हो. Teacher ignores the query. Student, अभी पुलबंगश के पास लड़ाई हुई थी. मुल्ला को पकड़कर जेल में डाल दिया गया. There was infighting near पुलबंगश. They put a Maulvi in jail. Teacher, उसे छोड़ो, ये देखो, इसमें लिखा है कि हर व्यक्ति को अधिकार मिलेगा जीने का. Leave that aside. Have a look at this. This says everybody will be entitled to the right to live. As you can see, while the children are struggling to make a sense of what secularism means in relation to their real life situations, the above interaction only leads to further confusion. The authority of textbook information is used to assert equality in the eyes of law and in asserting the relationship between various groups. The negation of children's real life experiences of discrimination faced by their religious group can further alienate them. Same is true of gender. I fear that notions of masculinity and femininity will not undergo much change with the kind of notions that educators who are in a position of authority themselves hold. We have a gender sensitization committee in our school which sees protecting the honor and purity of the few girls in the school as its only important task. In a brief meeting with the committee, when it was initially formed, I was comforted by the members. इस मामले में तो आप बेफिक्र रहें, ऐसा कोई मामला कभी बढ़ने नहीं दिया गया है. This statement did ring some alarm bells in my mind. Still, I was quite shocked by the committee's handling of what it termed as cases. One such case was that a girl and a boy of senior classes became special friends and were seen several times sitting together while their classmates were out in the playing field. Moreover, it was told that the boy accompanied the girl to her home. The committee worked out this case by calling children's parents to the school and informing them, especially the girl's parents, about her impunity. The boy was charged a fine of ₹500, while an undertaking was taken from girl's parents that such behavior will not be repeated in future. The parents got so scared that they refused to send their daughter to school. When I got to know of the incident, several months had already elapsed. When the principal saw my frustration and dissatisfaction, he remarked, "Ma'am, वो लड़की ही खराब थी, बहुत आँख नाक चलते थे." However, as a firefighting measure, the girl's parents were contacted and convinced to allow their daughter to at least take class 10th examinations. And this is not a sole incident, but several such episodes were reported. Conversation with the members of the committee revealed that because they naturalized boys' advances as normal, the responsibility of preserving their honor and purity fell upon the girls. Their slightest departure from what is considered as good behavior earns them scorns and reprimand, and suggests to all children that impudence on the part of boys can be tolerated, as it is natural but it is girls' own responsibility to guard their purity. Num- in the conclusion, I wish to highlight certain key issues. First and foremost is the need to understand that the community which is faced with compounded disadvantages has enormous yearning for education. Many young girls stay with their male relatives. This is an example which I have already given. While the school is bent upon protecting them, they have the courage to come out of the safety of their homes to live in a city like Delhi for education. Same is true of children like Ejaz, who despite spending 12 hours in a factory, make time for school. These structures, which include curriculum, notions of discipline and punctuality, success and failure, which work to their disadvantage. Moreover, children are objectified through classroom practices which don't take into account their real life situations and experiences. They are constructed as obscurantist, and the perception of discrimination in the society robs them of the confidence to search for better livelihood opportunities outside this ghetto. Moreover, the perceived social distance creates in them an illusion of dependence. Many children say, our teachers work very hard, but we are not able to deliver. There is a constant complaint from teachers that they have to dictate answers to the children as they are unable to write themselves. This acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy, and children are found running after teachers for notes. But I have noticed that there are many children in school who, if given a chance to write and express, they actually express very well in Hindustani. And it's not just me, many organizations and people like Anil have worked with children, and they too found that children are able to write their own histories involving their family, which includes their family history and the history of their mohalla, etc., very well. And they are able to problematize their description, give arguments, and use evidence. But school history curriculum just evades them. This is because of these reasons. One is the illusion of dependence that is created, and the second factor is the expectation of teachers about model answers. Towards the end, I would like to say that while these voices and images depict a shattering picture of this school, but there is hope. Few but heartwarming changes in the school and in school organization and activities make me optimistic that our children will have a better future. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get the second part.
So if there was one thing that you would fix the other part of it, that would make the lives of the student better, what would that be?
Okay, can we have more questions and then I can. One is where do teachers draw their locus of control from, and what kind of, if one change, if I could bring in school, what would that be?
ये
became the manager of the school. Actually, this school is run by a society which is called the Delhi Education Society, which was formed way back after independence, and people like Zakir Hussain were involved in formation of this society. And he was, Zakir Hussain was at that time the Vice Chancellor of Jamia Millia Islamia. So now what has happened is that whoever is the Vice Chancellor of Jamia becomes the president of the society in his or her ex officio capacity. And since the, our Vice Chancellor is the president of the society, so some of us get this opportunity to, to get associated with this school, and there are two other schools. One is this school, and the other school is, in fact, I think one of the oldest in the whole of South Asia. It is called Anglo-Arabic School, which is again amazing. So Anglo-Arabic School is one. There is a self-financing institution which has come up, and third is this school, Shafiq Memorial School, of which I am the manager. Yeah, where you asked that where do teachers draw their locus of control, and yeah, I think one is the distance between the perceived distance in terms of social class between children and the teacher, and they perceive them through a very middle class lens. Though I would also say here that some of the teachers, at least a few, 2 or 3 teachers, are they are from the same mohalla, and to one generation back, their parents have passed through the same kind of struggle, but now I feel that they somehow have managed to create this distance, which gives them, which in a way, gives them some strength to show themselves as different from those children. So this is how this whole thing happens. And regarding one change, actually there is changes are one small change. To bring about one small change in school, several changes have to be brought about. For example, recently the house system in the school has got activated, and it's been really working well for the last 1 year. But it may seem like a very insignificant change, but actually there were many deep-seated changes which were involved. One was that the teachers in the school, most teachers felt that they did not, they were not being given the opportunity to participate in the school administration and in school functioning. So, as the school became a much more democratic space, and when the teachers got this chance, they actually are now very enthusiastically participating. And the entire culture of the school has undergone a major shift. The children who used to earlier, it is actually very funny, but in our school bulletin boards, I think there are at least 20 in number, which we put up in the corridors. So they were put up only when we had some function or we had visitors like Anil. So we would quickly put up the bulletin boards, and which would then be, taken out and kept in the store, waiting for another function to happen. And because the teachers complained, and it used to actually happen, that children not only pull down the things which were put up on the board, but they actually destroyed the bulletin boards as well. But now when they have this opportunity and when the house system has become functional, they now have taken the ownership and they are really enthusiastic about it. And when even a small nail comes out of the board, they quickly pick it up and put it back. So one change really has many more factors which are in play to bring about one small change in school. So yeah, that's it. What else? Regarding sensitizing teachers, yeah, yes, some things we are working towards. I think, I may not perceive my position to be that of really, to be of power, but that is what the perception is. As when I engage with teachers, I find that the discourse has now become a little more political, like they will say with regard to parents not coming for the meeting, कि क्या करें बेचारे अब भाई नहीं आ पाते हैं. So that kind of changes are happening. And last year we had a small, again an intervention I'll call it, that was we had mentor system and teachers, they took 2 or 3 children and they took their responsibility of helping them and supporting them emotionally as well. And so they did not visit the mohallas or their places, but they spoke with them and sat with them for some time, and that also has helped a bit. So yeah, and we have tried to organize some workshops around gender and other such things. So it's going to be, I know, a long journey, but yeah, things will hopefully change.
Just wanted to know your thoughts on RTE, whether it has affected your school and do you think it's a big thing for the children that we have? I want to know how much
this question first. Actually, the conversation that I talked about, that I had with children in the context of the chapter on marginalization. After 2 or 3 classes, I got a bit scared, that is this the, and though I actually went by the way this chapter is structured, but it scared me that, they are, instead of seeing their multiple identities, they are identifying their religious identity as an overwhelming identity. So I got totally scared, and at that time Anil was, fortunately he was in Delhi, and I spoke with him, and I said that I think I will not be able to go beyond this point with children, and this is where I have landed them. So he took a class with them, and he talked about their context and about other things which impinge upon them, and later they were actually able to talk about a number of things. For example, they came to a point where they said that हमारा शायद हम जो disadvantages हैं वो एक मजदूर होने की वजह से ज़्यादा हैं, that the disadvantages we are facing are not just because we are Muslims, but more so because we are workers, and as workers they also came to a point when they said that we think that as workers we have more chances of coming together, because we will be able to gather support from various religious and caste communities, and we will be able to struggle for our rights. So if we need to actually engage with children, and these are because they have actually seen life through such at such close quarters, they are simply amazing, and they are really able to understand, and a consciousness can be developed in them about their about different structures which hamper their life situation. Regarding RTE, we have the school managing committee now, which comprises of 75% parents, but we have had just one meeting with Singh, and about changing the timings of the school, though those were not, of course, those could not be changed, but they did engage in a dialogue with teachers, and that actually had really effect on the whole school environment, I would say, because the teachers were actually they were in a pressure to respond, and they did, some changes did come about through this interaction. But there is one fear that I have with regard to the SMCs. I don't really know, because SMCs, actually the vision is that they will help to bring about not only change in the school environment, but also in the larger society. That is what the vision is. But I'm not sure, but I fear a cup-like situation can happen. For example, as I said, that gender in our school is the issues around that are constraining, and the parents may again participate in what the teachers are trying to do with children, with girls. So I'm not really very sure how this will work out. One has to, if the SMCs are to deliver, then we need a constant engagement with the managing committee members. We need to have a dialogue with them at a regular level. Then only I feel that the required change can happen. So, yeah, regarding is education really empowering them? Yeah, there's actually no single answer to this, because I find that some of my students, and that is only my hunch, I have to understand this better myself, that some of my students, students of our school, they are, because they their employers are in a way their role models, because changing life situation for them means not really changing the larger structures of society, but to that is their goal, to reach the position in which of their employer. So now I feel that they are, in a way, they have in a way become oppressors themselves. So that is my hunch. And some of them are, working towards changing the larger structures, and they are quite radical. And yeah, but yeah, but I have to, I'm not really sure. But I spoke with children who passed out 1 or 2 years ago, and they had very interesting things to say when I asked them, yeah, how is their education at school helping them? So some of them said that they are now, अरे मैम हम तो और पिछड़ी गए, पहले यही करते होते तो we would have been, ahead in the race. तो वही कुछ नहीं इसने किया. But there are others, and some of them said that it has only given us confidence to enter the British Council and to go to the McDonald's and ask for a burger. So that is what it has done to us. But some of them said that, we, whatever work that we are doing, we are, I think, they said that they were doing it much more systematically as compared to others, and they had a much larger vision for the work, and they were able to, the kind of things that they said, I can say, yeah, they have a vision of transforming the larger structures, and so that is it. Regarding, actually, is it somebody, mixed, and there was another question that, is it producing a class which is detrimental to nation? Actually, the perception of discrimination that I talked about, and how they perceive discrimination, but there are very interesting things in school. One is that there are very few Hindu children, who are just 2% of the total school population. And if you observe the conflicts between children closely, you will find that there are hardly any conflicts between Hindu and Muslim children. In fact, they are best of friends and happy. But the conflicts are much more between Shia and Sunni children, because there is about 8% of, there are 8% Shia children in this school. So, and it becomes quite a number for it to become politicized and to come into play. identity politics to come into play. But yeah, I think it is not just about perception of discrimination, as being Muslim, but also about understanding different identities and also becoming accepting of them. And that is required, I think, not just in this school, but every other school. And as far as, having mixed kind of school is concerned, before coming to a more heterogeneous and diverse kind of a school and common school system that she talked about, if one thing that I would want to point out here is that alienation is much more for Muslim children. It is not the same for Hindu children. If there are fewer Muslim children in any school, then that feeling of alienation is much more, because the kind of curriculum and the messages that they get, Eid is not celebrated, or my own children, the school trip went just one day before Eid, and it was a 3-day trip. So those things do alienate children. Yeah, this would be 50% Muslims and 50%, yeah. If it is a mixed kind of a group, it will, I think, tremendously help children. Though I will say that it is not just about the school diversity, it is also about the larger society and the messages that they get from media and larger society. So, but it is, of course, it will be a much better situation. This society is not a part of Jamia Millia. Though the president traditional, yeah, it's a separate organization. So, except for the fact that some of us get the opportunity to work with schools closely, our department does not participate in working with the school. So, yeah. Which would hinder the it can help, but it will I can say for a department like ours, like we are ourselves struggling to understand a number of things and issues, and yeah, but yeah, of course, if this tie-up, this I think is required, this university school linkage will help, and such linkages are to be forged, and both the faculty can participate in working with teachers, and students can also go and work with children. So I think that, and it has worked. JNU tried to work with some schools, and in what they called as University School Resource Network, and they have some amazing stories to tell.
Well, I think the question is that you have managers in the past
No, no, all our managers have not been from,
Many-
yeah,
many
but,
of them from Jharkhand.
ah.
So why is it that the school still remains where it is?
Yeah, school has not really changed, and these changes, and one fear that I have is that my term will end in another 8 months or so, and if the school will slide back to its original position. For these changes to be sustainable, one has to really work for a longer time and ensure that institutional structures are made, and moreover the organization of the school is such, of any school, and which is the greatest setback, that the organization is so very hierarchical that teachers, they work only to please the higher ups, and unless and until we empower the teachers, and unless and until that structure becomes much more flexible, wherein they are empowered to take their own decisions, the schools will not change. And some changes have happened, and some since some of these things have become functional, like the house system, we have a school council in place, then we have had annual functions. There are other such things which are happening. Though the classes are being held in time, I cannot really say that the quality has increased, has improved, but but still, due to some of these changes, the attendance has gone up and students are participating much more. But the organization structure, I feel that has to be it has to be reconceptualized, and teachers who feel really they are disempowered lot, they have to be empowered, they have to be given the more freedom to take their own decisions, and for these changes to be much more sustainable. That's true. Regarding what you said, trainings and are helpful and not helpful, and one has to look at the kind of training that we manage to organize with teachers. But I see that if they are organized in a certain way, changes do take place. And teachers, once they become conscious and they become aware of how these structures work, so they are able to align their pedagogy to their new and found understanding. So changes do happen, and there are teachers in school who are working towards that change, at least 2 or 3 of them. And yeah, I am quite optimistic that though it will take a long time, and it takes quite a lot of time, but yeah, changes are possible, because though it may just be 2% of the teachers who are trying new things, and they have actually become very open and sensitive towards children. So that gives me hope that okay, things can change. And yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is that teachers themselves, most of them, they come to the school every day, and their school is located within the mohallas, and there are they pass by those mohallas every day, but they have never bothered to see where the children live. And this awareness, some of one or two of these teachers, because they had to do some election duty, they went into the mohallas, and they came back with their own stories to tell. And I found a change in their behavior, and they came and they said that नहीं मैम कुछ करना है, और ये बच्चा ऐसे रहता है, and this is what the reality of these children is. So yeah, a change can happen, and it has happened. And yeah, as far as I can give you only one example. An alumna of our school is now, he was teaching earlier in our school, but I had newly become the manager just a few months back, and the way the directorate works, I got a letter from the directorate saying that this teacher has become surplus and he has to be transferred to another school. And I now totally regret that why I agreed to that transfer. This person, the teacher, his name is Irfan, and he actually he is not just working with children most sensitively, but he also works with parents, and he's trying to, because the kind of work which happens in the mohallas and these factories, it is casual labor, and there are no trade unions which are working in the area. So he is trying to organize workers, and so that their voice is heard. And the kind of relationship he has with the community, that in itself is, it's just remarkable. And yeah, that is just one example that I can